Hello and welcome to the MUFON Central Region presentation. We are a collective group of North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and Missouri. But this presentation is open to everyone. And this evening we have a very special guest speaker. His name is Mel Van Vickle. He is the Chief Investigator for Missouri MUFON. He has been with the group for several years. He's gone on multiple investigations. He is also one of our video and photographic analysts. And Mel just brings a lot of skill, and he's also a very, very interesting speaker and investigator. Welcome, Mel.
Thank you, Margie. And I hope you're hearing me well.
Yes, absolutely perfect.
Very good.
Yeah. Would you like to give everybody a little bit better description, a little bio of yourself?
Yeah, very quickly. I retired from agency known as NGA, National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. That was in 2012. And I joined MUFON as a member in 2019, and by November of 2019, I had become a brand new field investigator. And just literally days after that, I went on an expedition with Debbie Ziegelmeyer and my good friend, Dr. Russ Payne. That was on 5 January of 2020. And then COVID hit, and the presentation and a lot of my work went into just studying what we had just observed. This past Sunday was the 5th anniversary of that first UFO sighting of mine.
And you still haven't gotten over it.
No, I have not, actually. It was life-changing for me. And this presentation really probably, knowing me, would not have come off because I'm not usually doing presentations. But I was invited in 2023 to attend the 50th anniversary of a very famous UFO sighting that occurred on the 21st of February in 1973 in Piedmont, Missouri. The definitive guide on this is on your left, the book, The 50th Anniversary, written by Margie and Debbie Ziegelmeyer. And in that book, as I was reading through it for the first time in 2023, I came upon a reference I had never known before, Dr. Harley Rutledge, Ph.D., and the book he wrote is called Project Identification. Now, okay, let me find the advanced slide. Let's hope that. Good. Okay. This book is no longer in print, but it's easily available for free for download on the Internet Archive and very likely on other book services such as Google presents a good book service for download. This is a must-read, folks. I have to say, this is the most enjoyable field research book I have ever read. Now, Harley Rutledge came to this effort because in 1973, right after the Piedmont sighting, there were numerous newspaper articles written about it, both locally and in St. Louis, Missouri. And it was the St. Louis Globe-Democrat then, and the managing editor was George Killenberg. He heard of the sighting and elected to submit an actual grant to the University of Missouri in the Southeast Missouri State University, that is SEMO, as we call it, to the physics department. He the newspaper sent a grant to authorize and enlist someone from the physics department to study the phenomenon that had just happened in Piedmont. As it happens, Dr. Rutledge was the chairman of the physics department at the time, and he launched in as a very good scientist, coming to study this with the best technology he had at his disposal. And 7 years later, he wrote the book. Yeah. 7 years, this gentleman with a Ph.D. in solid state physics and a team of people that he could enlist set out to study the Piedmont site. Now, this photo on the left is actually from 1978 in a town northwest of St. Louis, but this is here to show you the equipment that was critical to his endeavor. These Questar telescopes. They're very powerful. They're not very easy to move around, as you can see. This is one of his team. On the right shows us the state of Missouri, the southeast section, and you'll note for reference the Missouri-Arkansas border, Memphis, and the Boot Heel area. In the circle is Piedmont. Now, that is where the sighting happened. In the course of his investigation, as I said, he went there literally to scope out the project, just simply to scope out, would it be anything that he could reasonably study. In the end, 7 years later, he had literally had 158 stagings, viewing stations that were set up, and you can see the statistics, hours spent with an average of 2 to 3 hours per setup with that equipment. And it says 620 observers. If you went to someplace twice, you were counted as 2. Okay. He categorized his sightings as either Class A or Class B. The third option was identified flying object, which we use today. What he classified as Class B are all of the basic things that they witnessed that they could not necessarily attribute to an UFO, but they could not readily identify it either. They did not have the benefit of things that we have today, like Flight Radar 24, to do their studies. Class A, those were simply, undeniably, incredibly, impossibly, something happened, and I saw it, and it was not possible with the technology we have. They had 34 of those such sightings, and well, I'm bouncing way too far ahead. My mouse is happy. Sorry. Okay, now I want you to note that whereas Piedmont was just a small circle in there, in the course of this investigation over the 7 years, he was in all of these different locations. Farmington to Sykeston is 77 miles as the crow flies. So they were all over the place. They were getting all kinds of sightings. The reason I think I like this book more than anything else was that this scientist needed 3 different chapters for conclusions, literally 47 pages. And in his conclusion, the 2 things that I took away the greatest, I'm going to be referencing his book all the time here, but he said in his conclusion that in the future, additional equipment is going to be needed, sophisticated, such as radar, the ability to record the intensity and spectrum of electromagnetic frequencies. This one I like. The data should be scanned and stored in small computer devices, and most important, automatic tracking devices are needed so that we can detect them and lock onto them quickly. So this is 1981. you may not know it, but there were no small computers in 1981. The university had huge computers, I'm sure, but he was prescient in this. He needed small computers, and he said UFOs will come back to Missouri, and he was going to be ready with the latest, greatest, up-to-date equipment to continue the scientific study. And I just had to hand it to him, because that's what we're doing today now. I just have to commend the man. It was a beautiful study, and we're continuing the effort here in Missouri, thanks to Debbie Ziegelmeyer's psionics camera. Here you'll see a picture of Mel on the left and the brown and the hat. And on the right is my partner, very good friend, Dr. Russ Payne, also a field investigator. And this is us on the 5th of January, 2020 at the site labeled 2A on your left, just outside of St. Clair, Missouri. I had no idea that this would be one of a series of sightings that had actually begun in 2018. In the full scope of these studies, we've had 5 different site visits, as you can see here, to this area of Missouri. At one point on the first case, I believe every investigator in Missouri attended that site at 1A at some point or another. We've had 10 or more field investigators, who knows how many witnesses, and we've been there at least 5 times in the last 5 years with this camera. Now, here's what I want understood about the camera. You will see this on TV at Skinwalker Ranch, and you'll see it advertised as night vision. It's not. This camera is not truly night vision in so much it's multispectral. It's a first generation of the multispectral camera systems known as near infrared. And to make science simple, very quickly, on the left, you'll see from a website, DP Review. I use it all the time. A comparison with all the same photographic parameters between an electro-optical camera, which is what every one of us has on our cell phones and our Nikons and everything, and a comparison shot with the psionics camera on the to the left, the near camera. Whereas the human eye, referenced to the right, you'll see the electromagnetic spectrum ranging from gamma rays on the left to radio waves on the right. We only can see with our eyes red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, the visible spectrum here, a very small part. There's another differentiation known as the visibility spectrum, which includes some measure of the ultraviolet light, our visible, and near infrared, as you see written here, infrared, and then thermal infrared. These are all categories of things that the cameras today can detect and present to us. The Aurora sees not only the entire near spectrum, but part of the infrared. In night mode, it is seeing parts of the spectrum that our eyes cannot see. And then it is transforming it into either a video or a still image using a color transformation similar to what you see when you see radar pictures on TV, and dark blue is heavy snow and light blue is light snow. They transform it. The point is, it is possible with the near camera to see things on the video or the still that are not visible to the naked eye, in addition to night vision. And you can see that in some respect if you look at the upper left and compare those 2 bright lights on top of the tower and compare the red in those. They're slightly different. That is a representation of something that you cannot see with your naked eye, but is visible now. So what we're saying is, whatever you think you're seeing with your eyes, there may be more to it in this video, and you're going to see that. This is the sighting area of my first sighting report at the little red dot there. Points of interest, I want you to note, on the upper left is an airport. That's a St. Clair airport, and it is closed, shuttered down. Nobody flies in or out of that airport. So we know that is not a source of what you're going to see. On your right, you'll notice triangular shaped lakes and ponds in this area. Those are interesting to me, but not yet. Now, the bottom arrow is pointing to a white dot that represents a pole light, a very tall pole light that illuminates the top of a hill. To the right are the people that live there. So you'll see that light featured many times. When we staged at that site, you can see here the house of the witness. You can see the garage of the witness and his truck, and you'll see where we staged our camera. We basically were looking in 3 directions most of the evening because the 4th direction was blocked by houses and trees. This was winter time, though, so there were no leaves on trees. This is what the view looked like looking west, east, and north from the site in twilight mode. This is a unique feature in the camera that it serves as a wonderful baseline for measuring on the imagery. Here you see what we're going to show you looking west, and this would be on the very far right of that west image is where the airport's located. To the north is his neighbor's house, and in the lower left you'll see a bright light. That's the porch light on his garage, and you'll see that sometimes. Looking to the east, you see most prominently the light on the pole at the top of the hill that illuminates the driveway for these people to come over the hill and reach the road. And I don't have time to play you the baseline video, but there is nothing observed of any unusual nature in the twilight photo. It's simply night vision. This is the night mode. In this mode, you are observing near infrared images as well as night vision electro-optic. You see there the light in the pole light across the street, and you see how wonderful the stars are. This is one of the great things about this camera. If you know what time that was and where you were, you have the star field that you can download the precise location of those stars at that moment, at that place, and you can triangulate the location of any object that you witness that evening with this mode. It's invaluable. It's wonderful. Now, talking about commonalities here, I want to go through the imagery that was acquired that first night. Now, remember, I was a brand new field investigator, had not seen anything really amazing. I'd been on some cases with Debbie and with Russ, but this was my first real exposure to what's possible here. I'm going to be showing you primarily imagery from, at least in the beginning, solely imagery from the night of my first sighting. I want you to notice here, one of the commonalities that I found in his assessment was that the data showed that the sightings are more prevalent around sundown. And we in MUFON notice that all the time. For some reason, around sundown is when we got our best material hits. He also, when Dr. Rutledge went on his first field trip to Piedmont, it was literally to assess the viability of the study. He wanted to go there, and he took with him a gentleman named Uleki, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, who was an astronomy professor at SEMO. So we had scientists here. On the very first night, they went to Piedmont from Cape Girardeau with their wives and met with people, had dinner, went on a night trip, a setup just to look and see what they were observing. They went to the same spot where Reggie Bone and his basketball team had their sighting earlier back in February, to the same place, and he saw something that very night, first day out. Rather than assessing the situation, he already had an observation. The three most unusual commonalities between what Dr. Rutledge discovered and what we discovered are three elements here. One is what he called the random flashbulb effect. Another, that FAA regulations were not being observed in the craft that he was observing. And third was an interesting note that we saw too. Apparently, these things had a habit of avoidance in their flight path. They would appear to approach and then intentionally deviate to avoid them. This way, he observed this in his very first day out in Chapter 2, on his first trip they made, and they saw it again in Chapter 10. Later, the same kind of effect known as the random flashbulb effect. So I'm going to show you, when we set up at St. Clair, this is the first video that Debbie set up on her camera, and I will play it for you now. She set it, that's it. Right there. She set up the camera, started it operating, it turned off within 1 second. It only recorded a 1.2 seconds of video. That's not normal. The camera is not that unreliable. That was unusual. So here I slowed this down to 10% speed. So 1 second will play in 10 seconds. And I want you to see all the activity that was happening in just 1 second of time. Here we go. You see that one, that one, that one. You see the activity blinking here. I hope you are. Let's play that one again. Over here, down here, up there, over here. There's a little gizmo flying up here. I think he's a satellite. That's in 1 second of time. Now, and did that flash of light instantly cause the camera to turn off? We don't know. But within a couple of minutes, Debbie had recognized that the camera was off, and she recorded XQE14, which is the name of the video that is just the most monumental thing I've ever seen. This whole video is wonderful. I'm going to play you 1 minute and 28 seconds where we began looking in this direction, expecting to see Starlink, which we really did not. Here's the video for that. Now, this is normal speed. This is not slowed. you'll see this guy here is very bright, but he's almost behaving like an airplane. That there is a light that does flash occasionally over in here. This, it's not big. I'm not seeing any indicator lights of any kind, and it's barely moving, but yet it's not growing bigger or smaller. It's as if it's hovering, but then it begins to move. There are lights that are blinking here that I can definitely associate here is an airplane. We discovered what airplane that was. This light over here, it's blinking between this star and this star, roughly in here, once in a while. And it is either white or it's lavender colored. These are not identifiable on any of our star chart applications. They're not defined in Flight Radar 24. And I just like this little fellow right here. You're going to see more of things like that in just a moment here. These, when Uleki observed it, he described that at some points more as if it was a tungsten filament light, which if any of you are familiar with, they flash brightly, but then they trail off slowly in intensity. What we're seeing are more like instantaneous flashes. But nonetheless, there are what I believe, yes, here you can see. This object appeared there. This object appeared here. And this object appeared just a couple times here. And it's not at all unlike what they witnessed the second time out from Miller's Point and a few months later. Now this one, I'm going to start this video playing and talk to you about the second from quoting what you see here. Immediately after that recording to the west that I just showed you, Debbie panned the camera to the east and began observations of two craft that they're shown here. They're both in motion, enlarged by 50% here to show you the nature of the strangeness. This was on the same videotape. She simply turned the camera on the tripod. It was at 4 minutes into the tape. This began at 4 minutes and 32 seconds into the recording of the video. And I'm going to talk through some things here. Now, as you're watching, I want you to be watching down in here in the trees. Here's one there. You'll see him come out. Now watch over here in the trees. You're going to see the second object. He's going to travel all the way across here. Now, the point that what you're going to see here, obviously these are behind these trees and behind those trees. Here he comes. Remember, he looked just like that little fellow we saw just a little while ago. This fellow here, he's going to travel across and come out in the same place as this is. This one is behind the trees. Now I'm going to lower this and let you watch. The thing to note, the thing that he noted the most, and I'm talking over Debbie there, I'm sorry. There's no navigation lights observable in this craft. There's no position lights. This is what he was observing. Rutledge was making observations in 1973 that he said his observations were of something that had no navigation lights, no position lights, no flashing strobe lights, as they should be. Aircraft and helicopter, the configuration of the lights will change as it comes to the observer. and passes by the observer, but he was seeing balls of light that's, yeah, that one's getting really bright. This does not behave like an airplane. Apparently, this is his words. Dr. Rutledge wrote, apparently the FAA regulations were not being observed. Then that's my partner, Russ, speaking there. Then Rutledge goes in through in chapter 2 there about all of the different paragraphs that in the flight FAA regulations that these things are defying. They are not doing it. Now, notice this fellow up here has turned from a bright ball to disc-shaped object with that crescent. The one on the left is still a gigantic ball of light. Aircraft can fly with their landing lights, but that's not even blinking.
Excuse me, Mel.
Yes.
Could you turn the sound off on that presentation?
I believe it's. I don't know if I can or not because it will shut off my speakers.
No, I don't think it will. It's on the bottom of your page, where you're playing that video.
That
in the center to the left is this.
No, that shut off mine. I don't see a place to turn that off.
On the left side, the left of the pause button.
Okay, I got it now. That'll work.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So having gotten up to this part, let me bump back here a minute. I'm going to jump. I'm going to let it go because I'm going to play a different one for you in a moment. But you'll notice now that at a certain point in this object, the second craft, it went from a bright ball of light to something that looks like it's actually a craft because you're seeing a red dot and a green dot and a white dot. The white dot's blinking. That's nice. Here's on the fourth day, the fourth trip. Here's the problem with that video you just saw, and it's as striking as it can be to me. In chapter 8, Rutledge describes a visit that they made to the Farmington Airport. The man in charge of the Farmington Airport was named Dingle, and they were there observing. This is what Pingle, I'm sorry, Mr. Pingle observed an airplane flying. He heard the sound of a turboprop, and he thought he heard the turboprop. He thought at first it was an airplane, but then he literally yelled, "Look at that, Ron. He's got a red light on the right wing." FAA regulations state that red light is on the left. When you're sitting in the pilot seat and you're looking straight ahead, the red light is on your left wing. The green light is on your right. During this sighting, this is his words. He noted that one of the strange facts was that the entire time they were in view, none of the lights. Now, he had seen what he thought were 4 lights in a row, okay? But the red light was the furthest on the right. And he said none of these lights were masked by a fuselage. There was no visible clue of any fuselage in that image. To him, he saw a row of lights with a slight angle as if it were a swept wing or a vertex in the direction of motion. What you just saw there was a craft that went from a bright ball of white light, and I'm going to play it in zoom in a crop here. They captured at that time, at that airport in 1973, May 24th, they did capture one photograph, as I understand it. That photograph was in black and white, as I understand it. And as I believe I understand it, it has been lost to humanity. We have a color photograph of a craft flying away from us with its lights reversed. Now I'll crop in on that time. This is the object you just observed. You see he's gaining in altitude. Now he's going to flip. That is so, it's impossible. Either that craft is flying away from us and the lights are reversed. Either it's upside down or flying in reverse, because those lights cannot present that way on a standard aircraft. And nobody is going to actually tell you that they switched them for some reason. That is just not what happened. We captured that here. As I said, there's no place for a fuselage. What is this object? Now this is my commonality with the avoidance of path. And whereas Rutledge described these things as appearing to approach and then intentionally deviating. And he experienced this many times, and he called it a subtle phenomenon. So I have got, let us do this. This, you're going to see an object down here. You're going to see two in this bottom break in the trees. One will fly past you very quickly, and one is going to come at you. I am going to play this and speed it up so that you can see, because the entire transit of this aircraft, of whatever it was 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Literally, that I was standing there observing what you're about to see with my naked eyes. Now remember, this is speeded up 5 times so that you'll see airplanes flying past one another on your right. Observe the craft that's coming at you with no navigation lights showing. If it has come through, now watch this one in the tree line. It goes flying past and does not come towards us. It goes somewhere else. This craft came on the same flight path. This is clearly a deviation of a flight path, intentional deviation of the flight path of that object. Now, I want to say again, you notice this is 5 times the normal speed, just for the sake of, I want to get through all of my videos. Okay. Now, what you're going to see next, well, let's go back. Now, you saw this craft pull out and literally come towards us and then appeared to move to our left-hand side. In the course of filming this, it started on a tripod, and by the end of it, this craft went completely past us, all of us, and we were able to see it in profile as it passed by us at the end of that 5 minute and 40 second. I'm going to play that part next in profile. Now, as you remember, up to this point, everything you have seen is a bright ball of light right there, and it flashes a bit. Now you'll see we have to pick up the camera in order to keep following it because it's going way completely up and around us. Observe the change that this craft has undergone. Ask yourself how many airplanes look like this. Is some of this near radiation? Is some of this invisible to the naked eye? Probably. I remember seeing this object blinking, but I could not see this object in this level of detail. The camera captured it. Notice it appears in every, even though the camera is moving and bending and twisting left and right, its orientation does change at times. And the pulse of energy is always seemingly in the forward motion, not in the rear. You can see now, look at the pedestal it's putting out there at the bottom, this little protuberance. This craft has gone all the way around us. We're now looking south at the trees that I told you before we never really looked at. That's how far around we had to go. And that was in 6 minutes. Here's some zoom ins, some enlargements of that object. When it turned and created a disc-shaped craft like this, and it seemed to have a protuberance here, it would look like this here at frame 170102. It would look like this with a minor protuberance. I don't know what that was. That showed up later. Then this is the object. It would pulse the light in the direction of travel, and 2 frames later, the object had moved to that position. It was moving into the direction of travel, seen even larger here. They're as large as I could enlarge it. I am seeing no directional lights, and it's in profile. No navigation lights. It's in profile. So we had seen that. That was in Site 2A. When I came home and started studying this video, I'll go back while I'm talking about this. When I started studying this video and really looking deeply at it, I was stunned and astonished. I had never seen a UFO before in my life when I came to MUFON. And literally a month after I got my certificate, Debbie takes me on a case. The case has been entered by this gentleman who said, this is happening all the time. Debbie made arrangements for us to visit that person strictly based on availability of people. Just strictly calendar availability of all of us in good weather. And we decided to go on the 5th of January in 2020. Here's what I did not know at the time, because I was a rookie and wasn't actually privy to that. But as Rutledge said in his conclusions, he really believed that there were intelligences involved and a game was being played on him and his people because of the way things that they were documenting. As it turns out, without my knowledge and without planning it, Debbie had set up the biggest coincidence I've ever known. This St. Clair Lights phenomenon actually had its beginning in case 1A, or in Site 1A, case 95424, that was initially submitted to MUFON on 7 October of 2018. I was a rookie and I was not privy to that investigation whatsoever until I got certified. Every other Missouri field investigator at some point between October and January of 2019, in those 3 months, I would venture every investigator in Missouri visited that site and worked that case. They observed all sorts of things. The witness said in his submission, he said he's not looking for any kind of recognition. He's come into something at his home in the rural area there of St. Clair that is not just fascinating, but it's becoming a nightmare to them. He simply wanted to know what in the world was going on, and he wrote it to MUFON. His sighting report later would become the subject of a television documentary on History Channel, I believe this was, or maybe Discovery, called Alien Highway, Season 1, Episode 5. The team, Chuck Zukowski and his team, visited this site with the help of Debbie Ziegelmeyer. And they investigated this site and took their own video. And somehow they missed. They just missed it. There's nothing else to say, because between the time that case was submitted in October of 2018 and January the 5th of 2019, all of these investigations were taking place. But on the 5th of January 2019, Debbie Ziegelmeyer, not part of this, recorded a video with her brand new Psionics camera. She and several other investigators, I believe our former chief investigator was there, along with Debbie, and they were down here on this sandbar, and they were looking in that direction, and it shows here the camera moves back and forth. This was on the 5th of January of 2019. That Debbie went out there and set up the same camera to make a video just because they were there that night. Now remember, this is 5 January, a year earlier, on a different case in the same area. Debbie Ziegelmeyer took her camera to that sandbar and, unbeknownst to me, recorded probably the first of the videos of these objects that I've seen, and it was never used on that television show. But this is the most significant proof, and I always run out of time before, so I'm so happy I'm going to be able to show this to you. Here's what I learned in studying this video that you're about to see. The Psionics camera, here's a map of Missouri. You'll notice here, up here in the upper left is where Debbie was positioned that evening. And I'll showing you the aim points as the camera was moving back and forth. This camera is able, in night mode, to capture the lights of an aircraft that is at least 90 miles line of sight from the camera. When you look on the Weather Channel and look at the day's events, visibility is 10 miles. On the best of days, you might get a very clear day at higher altitude that you can see farther than 10 miles. This camera is clearly observing aircraft that are at least 90 to 100 miles away. In the next video you're going to see, this craft, Southwest Airline Flight 3077, was directly over Cape Girardeau, Missouri, well, at beyond 100 miles from the camera. So that just by itself shows you what a difficult time we're going to have using this camera, because look at all the aircraft it's going to pick up. When I surveyed this, we were able to identify these aircraft in just that small swath of sky in the first 5 minutes of this video. Debbie turned the camera on, and in the first 5 minutes of this video captured the first known object of the sort that I witnessed 1 year later, exactly 1 year to the day, literally to the minute. because when I said we started our camera in my sighting after twilight, roughly 6 o'clock, we know for a fact that this camera was turned on here at Site 1 a year earlier at 6:02 p.m. Central Time. And we know that because by plotting the flight radar data for these aircraft and plotting the star fields from heavens above, we found that at 12:02 or at 6:02 p.m., which this is UTC time, at 6:02 p.m. that night at that location, this aircraft, JBU-89, was positioned directly in front of the star Arneb. And you will see when I start this video, the craft will depart and move to the right. Southwest Airlines down here is a 737. It's 100 miles away. You'll see this aircraft here disappears behind the hill. It's not very high in altitude. And this is over here in this corner, you'll see a Delta Airlines come across the field of view. The one craft you're not going to see at first is this K415TS. This Beech Bonanza A36 is at this moment in this direction. It's just slightly above the current field of view. So when the video starts, it's going to be at this level height on a tripod, and it'll swing to the right and back to the left, and then it's going to move up. And when it moves up, you will then be able to see this beach. Now I'm going to play this segment because I'm going to play it at 4x speed so that you can see these craft come into motion. And then I will play the next segment where it will move upwards. Let's play this. This is at 4x speed. So these, you'll see in the center, that was the craft that was in front of Arneb. This one's going behind. Southwest is over here, right there. You'll see Dow come in when the camera moves back. Remember now, this is at 4x speed because I don't want to run out of time. I want to show you what happens here. So you see, everything is pretty much normal and things are going along. No big crisis. All of these are airplanes. They're easily identifiable. And I was amazed at how far away I could see. There was a small red light over there in the right corner. That was the headlight, the tail light of a car, actually. We determined that. Now, the thing about that beach, when I start this up again, you're going to see the thing about this beach aircraft. In Flight Radar 24 playbacks, it pops on the screen once at this location, and it sits there and it stays there for a couple minutes, and then it blinks away. It's gone. Later, 6 minutes later, it appears down here in the bottom right at a totally different place, well south of us. It pops on. It shows itself. It's made a pronouncement. When it was up here, its ADS-B signal, its transponder, said that it was at 6,100 foot altitude. And you can see in this upper left in this small insert, at 3 minutes after, 1 minute into the video, it broadcast that it was here at 6,000 feet to the north of us. 6 minutes later, it was at 8,000 feet to the south of us. And yet, there is no tracking graph on flight radar. This is indicative of a single broadcast that was not coming out every minute as it should, or was not being found every minute. This broadcast should go once a minute. It did not. It did not come on again until 6 minutes later in a different place. So that's a curiosity point. When I plotted, every presentation needs a good graph. So here's your graph. Absolutely love graphs. This is a flight path of all of the aircraft that we were just discussing. And you'll see the stars, and they're fuzzy because of the relative motion during that 5-minute time the stars move that much. K415TS, in the beginning, it was above our field of view in the middle of Orion here. That's Orion's belt. And it was at 6,000 feet. It would have appeared roughly there. And sometime in the next 6 minutes, it has reached 8,000 foot. So I have no idea what happened in this intervening time. Let's play that. Let us play. Now here's segment 1 at 4. We'll play this one here. Here's clip 2. Now I want to pause this. If you remember, the camera has been moving back and forth, left and right, as it was transiting, and I told you the camera was going to tilt up. Well, this is at the point now. I've started this clip 2 where the camera begins to elevate, and then you will be able to see that beach aircraft. So here we go. All the other aircraft we know about. Where's the beach aircraft? You see this object here? That's not it. This is the beach aircraft here on the correct altitude. This craft is entirely higher in elevation angle than the beach. This craft is not on flight radar. This craft is identical to what I observed in my first case, my first UFO sighting, which was 1 year exactly to the minute from the time that this video was made. So was a game being played? I contend that I think Rutledge had it correct. There is a game that these things are playing with us. His conclusions took 3 chapters, and let's just observe this thing for a minute. Watch. It's discoidal and it's bursting. The beach is still here. The beach is over there moving along its path. This is not the beach aircraft. This is not on flight radar. And there's all these blinking things down here that don't show up on flight radar. This one is not, I know for a fact. What exactly are we to make of this? Now, I'm leaving it running because the camera pans to the right and you'll capture one last fleeting glimpse of that object. Still progressing, the same size, so it's basically the same distance from us. So, was a game being played? Observe this. Here's, again, my graph. Here is the beach aircraft, right here. Right at the altitude it should have been, amidst the belt of Orion. This thing, when first observed, was far above the belt stars of Orion. And you can see its shape. So much similar to what we had in my sighting. And yet, it was a year earlier. Some final things I want to toss in. 3 chapters of conclusions. Every one of them I would like to present to you, but I want to get moving here. The ones that I took away that were the most important to me. Note, in his conclusions, Rutledge stated, I suspect that UFOs actually dart about in the daylight at speeds at which we can't even see them. I base this on a few cases of reflected sunlight and circumstances of a disk that hovered within the viewing range of his office one day because it knew he had been studying them. This physicist, Ph.D. in solid state physics, this is a scientist. He wrote, unbiased, disinterested physical scientists usually measure the properties of inanimate matter. Biological, medical, behavioral scientists study intelligences that are less than or equal to our own. In this project, he, meaning me and we, dealt with an intelligence equal to or greater than that of man. We interacted with the phenomenon under study. It wasn't until he began his investigation at Cape Girardeau that he began to think that these things were being staged for him. There were 2 sightings where he was believing that telepathy may have been involved, that they were actually performing for him. Now, in early in the field research, he said, I realized that events seemed to be related, but as an unbiased observer, I could not assume relationships between events without proof. But considering the fact that he has identified 80 occasions in his sighting and stagings, which he labeled as coincidences, and he could probably have counted 20 more, he began to believe that these coincidences were not, in fact, coincidences at all, but literally what Carl Jung referred to as acausal, meaningful coincidences. I'm not up on Carl Jung, but this researcher, this scientist, was overwhelmed by the number of coincidences he was encountering. And finally, in the research that was involved was more than measurement of physical properties by a dispassionate set of observers. They developed a relationship, a cognizance between them, and the intelligence evolved. The UFO intelligence, to his feelings, evolved to work with them. A game was played. He says an additional consideration is more important than the measurements. The facet of the UFO phenomenon perturbed me as much as the advanced technology that he was observing, and it still bothered him 7 years after, when the book was actually published. The things that he had seen. Now, I may have accidentally forgotten to mention that here, Professor Rutledge stated that he suspected these UFOs dart about in the daylight at speeds where they cannot be seen. I need to point you to the fact that Margie Kay and my friend Wayne Lawrence, along with a gentleman named Bill Spicer, wrote a book with evidence of what we call fast movers. This is recent. It's an excellent treatise on the subject. And it was literally proposed by a solid state physicist, 50 years ago? 45 years ago? Well, Wayne Lawrence and Margie and Bill have literally written the book on that one too. It's a good read and I recommend it entirely. So this is just my short presentation. I could talk on any one of these videos for an hour or 2 or 3, but it's a tribute to Dr. Rutledge. And the fact that I even come up and sit here and talk to y'all about this in such an affirmative statement, that is a UFO that I witnessed, that I saw in profile, and all those other gizmos. And they continue to this day. We have made 5 visits down there already. The sightings continue. We've got even more equipment that we're going to take to the field. Hopefully, if this weather ever breaks, to keep looking for this phenomenon that I call the St. Clair investigation, or the St. Clair Lights. So, leaving you with the words of the great philosopher Don Henley there, the more I know, the less I understand. And all the things I thought I'd figured out, I have to learn again, folks. And so do we all. I think I'm done with it now.
Well, thank you so much, Mel. That was absolutely fascinating. And it just goes to show how complicated a single case can be. And then not to mention how it can go on for years.
And the most phenomenal things are there in the night sky. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it now better with these new technologies that Dr. Rutledge wishes he had back then. We're carrying it on. Margie, you were there. You at that first site. Yeah. You witnessed and documented the portal that appeared for you. That first sighting, you guys examined it for how many different things? There were Bigfoot.
Yeah, there's a lot going on at that location. So much that we determined it had to be a portal. We've got a question from Tamara. She says, could you explain more on how the device was set up that combined heavens above and flight radar 24?
Absolutely. A brute force Excel spreadsheet did that, but the principle is that you identify the location of your camera and you identify the star field that's showing on your video. And that gives you the azimuth and the altitude of the center of your photo. You can see the stars, and as long as you know what time it is, you know exactly where the center of that particular photograph or video is. Then you take flight radar 24 and you plot the geographic coordinates from the transponder, the latitude and longitude that object was at every time it sent out an ADS-B broadcast. The direction from where your camera is to where that plot placed the aircraft is your azimuth. The stars will give you the altitude. Did that help?
Most definitely. And there is a lot of science to this.
Oh,
and math.
But it's math it's science made simple. I do not know how this camera manages to capture infrared imagery, but it does. It can capture. If there's an object out there in space that is not emitting visible light, it's not reflecting visible light, but it gives off near infrared light, it is possible that you cannot see it, but the camera will show it to you. So every time you take that camera out, you don't know what's going to come home with you.
Right. Do you have any suggestions for just any type of field investigator going out into the field? Do you suggest, what kind of equipment would you suggest that they have? And is that camera a must-have?
That camera is rather expensive. Now, honestly, my first sighting was 5 January of 2020. 3 weeks later, COVID hit. Everyone went into lockdown. No one was allowed to visit with anybody. You had to find Zoom to talk to people. I used my COVID money to buy the camera. And because I became a believer, but I needed that extra time to absorb and get over the jitters. Frankly, I understand why people don't want to come forward with their sightings, because I went there believing in UFOs, never having seen one, and I came away shaken to my core for a good long time. Do I recommend that you go out and buy that camera if you're going to study UFOs? Yes. If you're going to study ghosts, I don't know, but what ghosts aren't appearing on this type of a camera? I can't say for sure. For the average person, I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend that. Field investigators, we invest in a lot of equipment that we may only get to use once, but by golly, you just got to have it. So as soon as I got done with that sighting, I went out at first available time and bought the same camera Debbie had. I think we have 5 of them now in the state of Missouri, don't we? You have one. Ray Graham has one.
No, I do not have that
Carl
one.
Harper has one.
Yeah, Carl has. I think Ray may have one. Yeah, we're pretty much covered, which is also nice that the investigators work together because we all have different equipment. A lot of times we have duplicates, but that's okay, because if you've got 2 or 3 pieces of equipment out and they all go off at the same time, something's going on.
Oh, absolutely. On that one sighting of mine, after that one video XQE14 finished, we stayed for another hour and a half, but the camera was repeatedly turning on, turning off, wouldn't play a video. Batteries were dying. As a matter of fact, I just sat down next to I went back into the garage with the witness, sat down next to a nice heater that he had set up right in the front of the door, and we just talked for, who knows how long, watching these things flying by. This fellow, the witness, had literally said, "You come by anytime. They're here all the time." Skeptically, I didn't think that would happen, but that's exactly what happened. We picked any old time, and they just decided that we needed to be there on the 1-year anniversary of the first sighting that Debbie had with that camera. I am so happy to be a part of MUFON and working with you guys. I really appreciate all the latitude and the hard work that you give me to keep me employed here. This is a pleasure to be with you guys.
We are lucky to have you, and remind me that you need a raise from 0 to double.
You know what a profitable enterprise MUFON is.
No, it costs, but it's.
Thank you very much, and this is just an amazing case, and we continue to work it. And if I get good updates, I'll bring them for you.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Mel Van Vickle. This is a presentation by Central Region MUFON, and we'll see you here again next month.